You're listening to Finding Joy in Education, the podcast that focuses on what brings us joy in the field of education. Each show, you'll hear joy stories from teachers of the year, educators from all walks of life, and leaders, as well as hear hacks to enhance the teaching and learning in our classrooms. This is Finding Joy in Education. Hi, and welcome to the Finding Joy in Education podcast. Thank you for joining us. This is episode 4, Finding Joy Through Student Supports. In today's episode, you're going to hear from incredible educators from across Pinellas County as well as across from the country. We also have some strong leaders here that are going to share with us how they support not only students but teachers to bring student success to our schools. And then we have some very special guests that are going to share some hacks on how to help with behaviors in our schools. You're now listening to segment 1, Finding Joy in Education. And joining me today in the studio are some very special friends of mine. You will notice they all have something in common. They are all at Eisenhower Elementary, which is the school that I am at. We have Miss JJ Dalton. She is our school counselor at Eisenhower Elementary. Kristen Perlman, our school psychologist, and Miss Monica Velarde, our behavior specialist, our new behavior specialist at Eisenhower Elementary. So ladies, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for giving up your evening and coming. And I'm super excited to kind of leverage your expertise about our topic tonight, which is supporting students and bringing joy to education. So JJ, I'm going to start with you. And I ask every guest this question: what's your story?
So, growing up, I always loved kids and working with kids. My mom always says to this day, there was never a kid that I met who didn't love me. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what led me to this career. I'm a product of Pinellas County Schools. So I went to Bay Vista Fundamental for elementary, Southside Fundamental for middle, and then St. Petersburg High School in the IB program, class of 2010. And then I went off to college. I went to University of Florida. I majored in psychology. And throughout my time there, I was like, you know what? I think that I might want to work in education. So I picked up a minor in educational studies. And then I was trying to think what to do after that. Decided I wanted to try school counseling. Went to University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and got my master's in school counseling. And then I missed Florida, so I applied for jobs here. My first job was in Pasco County. I live in St. Pete, so it was kind of difficult to go there every day and then come home. And that's how I found my way to Eisenhower. There was a posting for a counselor there. I had no idea what an amazing school it was. Yes. When I submitted my application, I went to the interview and I was like, you know what? I'm going to love this.
This is so great. And I've said it before. I've said it to you. You are one of the best things to have ever happened to Eisenhower Elementary. You have changed the culture of our school. Our students feel so safe with you. And I can't wait to share more of that as we go. You did leave one thing off your resume, though. You had an award in 2021. Would you please share about that?
Yes. I received the school counselors in Pinellas County give out awards every year. And I had some lovely colleagues nominate me from Eisenhower for Elementary School Counselor of the Year. And so I got that a few years ago.
That's so, you do not forget that. That's huge. That's so big. And it just goes, it's a testament to the hard work that you've put in at Eisenhower. Kristen, what's your story?
So I am also a product of Florida, born and raised. When I was going to school, elementary, middle, high school, I didn't even know what a school psychologist was. But person never kind of crossed paths with me. It wasn't until graduate school that I kind of started learning how I can use, my degree in psychology and use it within the public school system. I graduated my bachelor's in psych, and I was ready to go out into the world and do great things. And then I found out that, if I really want to do something with this, I need to go back to school. So going back to graduate school, it was either sports psychology or school psychology. And school psychology definitely has a critical shortage. It did when I went to school. It currently does now.
Yes.
And so that was definitely job security for me. So that was something that I more or less fell into, and I'm so glad that I did.
We are too. And I think it's interesting you talk about not knowing that job existed when you were a student, not knowing who fulfilled those roles at your school, but how many students probably do now because of you and the work that you do at Eisenhower.
Quite a few.
Yeah, we're very grateful for that. And Miss Monica, I don't know why I keep saying Miss Monica, but it sounds cute. So what's your story?
Well, my story is still going on. I am just going to start with my career as an educator. So this is my 13th year in education. The first 10 years was in the classroom, teaching second all the way through fifth throughout the years. And then an opportunity came up at Eisenhower to transition to a VE resource teacher to really focus on those students with special needs. And I've been wanting to do that for a few years. So I was scared, but I jumped on it. And when I got there, though, I was in for a rude awakening because those students came with challenges that I was not prepared to meet. So during that first year in that position, I went back to school and got my endorsement in autism spectrum disorders to just help me, meet those students and their needs, which then led me to this whole world of behavior. And meeting students' behavioral needs will then meet their academic needs.
Yes.
So that led me into this position I'm in now as a behavior specialist. I, took all the trainings and classes to be qualified to do that. And then now I am starting this summer at grad school to get my master's in exceptional student ed and applied behavior analysis to kind of continue on this new path and this new journey.
And I've gotten to see Monica in every single one of these roles. She was one of my teammates when we were teaching fourth grade and fifth grade, and then to see her as an ESC teacher and now as our behavior specialist. It's just been beautiful to watch you wear each hat and wear each hat with grace, and to know that you are very reflective and that you look for ways to improve yourself, which ultimately improves our students. So I'm just grateful that you have that piece to look back and go, I want to be more. I want to keep growing. So that's just beautiful. So we know our episode is about finding joy through supporting students. So I thought we could give our audience a little moment to hear what those supports look like through your lens. So within the context of your job, how do you support students? And then ultimately, how does that lead to joy in education, in our schools, and in our classrooms? So JJ, I'll start with you. What kind of supports do you provide, and how does this bring joy?
So as a school counselor, I make sure to do 3 things and do these 3 things to fidelity. And that is go into every single classroom at least once a month at the school, K through 5, and teach social emotional lessons. The second one is to do small group counseling with kids who need a little bit more than that, a little bit of extra than just in the classroom, and then also provide individual counseling on an individual basis. The goal of a school counselor is to help these kids feel joy at school so that they can be successful with their academics. So that is really my goal in working with all students at the school. I try my hardest every single day to help these kids feel happy to be at school, learn strategies they need to be able to be at school and be successful. So I would say those are three of the biggest things.
The big rocks. Yeah. I love it. I love that you are present in classrooms. I think that going back to what Kristen said, as a student, we may not always understand the roles that these adults on campus play, but I think you've made it your point to make sure students know what your job is. I've heard you quiz kids say, who am I and what do I do here? I help you think about your feelings, right? Like you quiz them because it's important that they can connect to that then if they are having big feelings one day, and to know, oh, I can go talk to Miss Dalton because she's here to help me process through those feelings.
And one thing too that I love about that is that I don't think students should think about seeing the school counselor as something that only some students get to do.
Yes.
I want all students to feel like they are able to come and talk to me regardless of the type of problem they're having.
Yeah. Very good. Kristen, what do supports look like for you, and how does that bring joy to education?
So I can do similar things that Ms. Dalton does on a daily basis as well. That is actually one of the things that I enjoy most about the job is doing those small groups, social skills lessons, individual counseling. I also wear a lot of other hats on campus, and a major part of my job is also providing teachers, interventionists with academic supports for students. So looking at, how a student is performing, what their specific needs are, and then how are we able to fill those gaps with their needs. And then ultimately, the goal is for them to, meet academic independence, and so they don't require those supports anymore. But if they do, then look at special education evaluations and kind of different strategies and supports for how can we potentially help them long term. And so I think, just within the school, helping students kind of identify the things that they may be struggling with. And, but this is the plan that we have in place to help you. And doing that with parents and
I was going to say,
well.
if you didn't say it, I was going to say it. I sit in many meetings with Kristen as the MTSS coach at Eisenhower. I work very closely with her when we're looking at our multi-tiered systems of support and how to lessen those gaps in learning for our students. And so one of the things that Kristen does is she meets with the families. And I have watched her counsel countless families on even just explaining the process to them in a way that doesn't feel intimidating or threatening, and letting them know that our goal is ultimately to close that gap, not to necessarily place them into special education, but we're going to find what they're missing and continue to intervene until that gap closes. So Kristen is just a mastermind at meeting with families and using everyday language to explain to parents, especially for those who may be intimidated by coming into the school setting and meeting with someone who has such a long title, like that's intimidating. Like you said, not everyone understands what your role is. So you're really great at being that in-between for the families and the teachers and explaining that process. So we're so grateful for that. Monica, what do student supports look like for you? I chuckle because I know we don't have enough time for you to explain them all. But if you would just maybe speak a little bit about ESC, because we do not have an ESC representative here at the table. And I say that you guys are just a fraction of the supports that are available to students. We do not represent every support that is available, but, so speak a little bit about what that ESC support can look like, and then also the behavior support that is your new role that you've stepped into.
Sure. So I do support students with social emotional needs. I do pull social skills groups, with goals on their IEP to try to meet those goals. I also try to be as proactive as possible and be present in classrooms so I can, meet those students' needs as much as possible. So not necessarily just, 15 minutes two times a week as stated in their IEP, but just as much as I can and to be that positive person, another positive person in their world. And that kind of leads into the behavior supports that I provide. I do everything and anything that a teacher needs, and or a student needs. I try to be as available as possible for whatever they might need. really behaviorally or academic. So, I might be going in there for a behavior call, but I'm going to sit there and address that, but also make sure that they get their academic needs met as well. So just kind of a gambit of, what do they need in that moment? I laugh when I come into work. It's like, I don't plan anything
planning what your day looks like.
I'm just going to come in and see what the day brings me and just be ready for anything.
Yeah.
And just be readily available for those students and for those teachers.
Yeah. And I think one thing I heard from like all three of you is that proactive piece, right? So planning how you're going to support students, but I also heard you all three say being present. And I think that's what makes our team so special at Eisenhower as opposed to maybe any other team is that we are present on campus. We are there greeting students in the morning. We are there in the cafeteria. We are there at dismissal as they get on the buses. We're moving about campus all the time. So our students know that they have us and that they have you and that they have people, trusted adults. And Monica, one of the things I love about your job is when you go into the classroom and support the student rather than remove them. Because oftentimes that's what they want, right? They want to be removed and to be taken out of the situation that's uncomfortable or challenging. And so when you push in, you're sending the message, this is important. This assignment is important. Your education is important. So I think that when you get to do that and play that role, I think that's where the joy in education comes from as well. Because now we're supporting the teachers as well and making sure the students get that work. So when you think about the supports that you provide, if our listeners could have one takeaway from each of you, let's say one nugget that you could give them of, if you do anything, do this one thing, and it could change the results that you're seeing with student behavior, student academics, student social emotional learning. What would be your one nugget, your one hack, your one truth that if you could get teachers to do, could be the game changer for them?
The biggest thing, or the first thing that pops into my mind, is those trusted relationships. I think that goes without saying, but at the same time, as educators, we can lose sight of that. And I think it's important to remind yourself every single day why you do what you do.
Yes.
We all do what we do because we love kids. We wouldn't be here if we didn't. And so it's important to create that trusting relationship, whether that's spending 5 minutes every morning with your class doing a circle, talking about a social emotional skill, making sure that kids know when they can come and talk to you. I think that the relationships would be.
And I'm glad you defined it, because we hear in education, form relationships,
Right.
and we don't ever quite say what that looks like.
Right.
So I love that you gave some strong examples, that morning circle with your class. That's how you build trust.
Right.
You show that you're listening and you're invested in what they have to say. So I agree. I think relationship building is huge. Kristen, what would be your nugget to give to our listeners?
I would say the nugget that I give is kind of twofold, because it can tackle academic concerns as well as behavioral concerns, and just the school psych in me is like data.
Oh, yes.
Can be kind of to teachers sometimes, but doing your work up front and knowing exactly what your student needs.
Yes.
From an academic perspective, what that could look like is doing a core phonics survey, or really understanding where their gaps are, because then we can plan well for how we can fill them. What intervention that we put into place is really important, and we can't just throw out an intervention because that's what we like or what we have access to. Because if you're trying to work on phonics skills and you're doing an intervention that focuses on comprehension, you're not going to see progress. But that's not because a student can't progress or they just are not being given the correct tools. And then from a behavioral perspective, just really focusing on what is that student going to work for? What motivates them? What is that little piece that I can dangle in front of them in order for them to get from point A to point B? And that doesn't always have to happen at a teacher level. We are all here as student supports.
I love that.
Because we are, here to support teachers, support students. So if we can give some tools or do some of those things and do those assessments or those kinds of things, kind of dig a little bit deeper, because teachers they have a curriculum and it is fast paced and they don't have a lot of time to deviate from. So utilizing your resources within your school as well.
And I love that you kind of hinted at this. This isn't for every student either. This is the student that falls out of that 80%, right? So like these supports that we have, they're available for every student, but not always necessary for every student. So finding those kids that your classroom management plan doesn't work for, have those conversations, find out what drives them, find out what they will work for. And usually that increases their academic success as well. Monica, what would you advise our listeners for something that could be a game changer when dealing with students?
So I want to piggyback off of JJ a little bit, and just building those positive relationships and that sense of belonging within your classroom, I think goes a long way. And with that,
You have great experience because you were a classroom teacher.
Right.
So
Yes.
you know, and we've all seen that, your ability to do that.
But if you are building those positive relationships and you get to know your kids, then you'll know their triggers, what sets them off, and recognizing those before it escalates, and meeting their needs immediately. So that way they don't get to a point where they're losing out on instruction, because, at the end of the day, that's our job is to teach them. And if they are escalating and they need to be pulled out or whatever, they're losing that. So just, building those positive relationships, sense of belonging, you want your kids to want to be there.
Yes. And that's really, Mr. Hendrick, our superintendent, talked about that. If we can get them to want to be at school, we've won. If they can want to be there, we've got it lined up for success. So as we close this out, I have a few more questions. I want to ask, have you come across any misconceptions or myths about student supports that you'd like to address here on the podcast? So anything that you can think of that maybe the public or teachers have a misconception about what you do or what you don't do?
I think that, and I think we all would agree, a lot of times it's hard because in our roles, we're the only person in our roles at our schools, at least at the elementary level for counselors. And a lot of times when I am or we are working with a student in an office, no one is watching what we're doing. And sometimes they might assume we're letting them play or we're letting them just do whatever in the room, when in actuality, we're all trained professionals and we have our ways of working with kids and building relationships. And so I think that that's just one little misconception.
Yes, that's a huge one. And I think, go back to what Kristen and Monica said, you're providing what that child needs.
Yes,
and it might be play therapy at that time, right? So it's almost like if you've called us to intervene, then you've washed your hands of it and you're allowing us the dignity to make that call and make that decision. I love that misconception. And I know we'll get some head nods with that one. Were you going to say something else? I didn't know if I cut you off.
No. I don't know if you guys wanted to add
Kristen,
to that.
Yeah. Do you guys have any other misconceptions you can think of?
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off of that too. With behavior, we also can't control student behavior.
We don't have a magic wand. I wish.
Right. But, I tell my kids, or the kids at Eisenhower, all the time, who are you in control of? You're in control of yourself. So I can't control student, but none of us here at the table can control a student. What we can control is our perception of the problem, how we are looking at those triggers and, putting supports into place proactively. What we can control is just being present and having a student feel heard in that moment. Those are some things that I think go a long way with students and something that we can control, but we cannot control how a student is acting.
That's very good. Monica, what about you?
I was just thinking that one misconception that I deal with on a daily basis is that when I am called to a classroom, that I'm pulling a kid out, or that they tell me you need to. And I'm not always comfortable doing that because, again, at the end of the day, what is our job? And it depends on, it's situational based, what does that kid need at the moment? And if I can address their needs within the classroom so they're still learning, that's my preference. So just that misconception that I show up, they're out. And that's not always what's best for them. So just kind of addressing that.
And I think that we didn't really touch on it, but it's kind of inherent in the three of you is communication. Like that solves a lot of that. So an assumption that they're going to play, but then at the end of the day, JJ, you sending an email or going to talk to that teacher and giving them the rundown, I think helps smooth that over. And Kristen, same with you. I know that sometimes it's just an email or a quick pass in the hallway, like, hey, I did meet with that student. Let's go chat about it. And Monica, I know that you don't always do it on the spot because it's not appropriate. And oftentimes we don't want to do it in front of the student.
Absolutely.
But I think the three of you are so good about circling back and explaining yourselves. And I think the more teachers get used to that, the more trust is built in what you guys are doing on our campus. So before we wrap it up, I love to end with our joy stories. So these are stories that you can think of that either involve a student, a colleague, an administrator, anyone in the realm of education, that when you think back on this story, it connects you to your why and reminds you why you love what you do. So Monica, I'm actually going to start with you and we'll go this way and end with JJ. So would you share with us a joy story?
So mine's not just an individual story. I actually find joy every day that I come, and I'm going to cry a little.
I know. This part always gets
just because those kids that we do get calls for, those kids that can give, us a headache, they see me first thing in the morning, a giant smile, a big hug. Or I walk into a classroom because I got called for them and their behavior immediately changes. So, I'm not a source of, oh, they're in trouble, but a source of like, oh my goodness, she's here. Thank goodness she's here to help.
And a source of safety, I'm sure, for a lot of our kids.
Yes, and that's always what I say when I get to kids is like, how can I help you? What can I do to help you? That's why I'm here, not to get you in trouble. You're not, how can I help you? And then at the end of the day, several teachers are like, thank you. Thank you for what you've done.
Yes.
Thank you for XYZ throughout the day. So those things really drive me every single day.
Yes.
And honestly, like, if I can just say this, like this year, previous years, I've second guessed myself. Is this where I'm supposed to be? And this is the first year where I'm like, I am excited to come to school every day. I know that I'm making a positive impact.
I know, me too.
I know I'm making a positive impact. And it just keeps me going.
And that's the bravery, I think, of teachers right now in our current culture and climate in schools, is that some of them are feeling bogged down, right? They're fatigued. And rather than quit, it's find the thing that brings you joy. And that's what's so brave about what you've done is you've worn several hats and you found the one that not only brings you joy, but brings joy to our students and to our campus. So that's so beautiful. Kristen, joy story.
Well, my joy story is going to be about a group of people that you haven't talked about, which are parents. And
they're my favorite.
A lot of times in my role, we are kind of the first person that may tell a parent that we would like to look at an evaluation for some kind of special education eligibility. The story that I'm particularly thinking about is autism spectrum disorder. And there have been several cases where us sitting at the table is the first time a parent has heard about that. Typically, it has come after many phone calls to parents about student behavior. And so we have kind of started that us versus them mentality.
Yes.
And so they come in on the defensive and what do you want to label my student? Like, why are we doing this? These kinds of questions, which is natural. But going throughout the process and inviting them to every meeting and, continuing to empower them that they are a vital member of our team.
Yes.
And, by the end of evaluation or, a couple years later in an IEP meeting, having them look at us and just say, thank you. This is kind of the validation that we were missing because we saw all of these things, but we didn't know how to put it all together and what that meant for education and, can they grow out of some of these behaviors and those kinds of things. So, having parents take a step back and be like, wow, like this is, I am a part of this team, but, we have all come to this conclusion and, are continuing to support that student.
Yeah, and we hear it takes a village to raise a child, but we often leave the parents out of that village in the school setting. So the fact that you include them, which I didn't know that was going to be your joy story, and I already kind of complimented you on your work with parents, because I have seen it, and I have seen you shed light on things that maybe they haven't considered, but they walk away with such a peace, I think, because of the way we are meeting the needs of their child. And you always keep that at the center of your conversations and your work. So I love that joy story. I love you. May be the first one to ever bring up parents. So I just think that's so incredible. JJ, let's end with your joy story.
I have like a million that I could talk about, because I've said this many times already. My relationships with kids are what are my joy. And I would say the evolution of my relationships with kids. And that's another thing that we as student supports can do, because we can sometimes be with students from kindergarten until 5th grade, and we get to experience them growing up. And so I have a specific story that kind of links to that. I said before in my story question that my mom always says I've never met a kid who didn't like me, or who didn't run right to me. And so when I do meet kids who are a little bit iffy at first, we work in a population that can be a little bit rough around the edges. Yes. And so there's one student, a boy, he started with us a few years ago. He's in 5th grade now. But when he began, I was trying every day to create a relationship with him. I would say good morning to him, goodbye to him at the buses. He would shrug. He wouldn't even look at me. He'd put his hood up. Brand new. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to just keep going. I'm going to keep trying. I'm not going to let this put a wedge in the relationship that I want to create. Fast forward, I picked away. And last year I was getting married, and I had sent out an email to the staff just to say I was kind of doing my own DIY decorations. And I was like, if you have any time, tell your kids that I need some pine cones. Didn't really think anything of it. I had tons of kids bring me pine cones. But one day this boy came to my office, knocked on the door. I went to answer it, and he goes, I collected all these pine cones for you at my grandma's house. So he had literally spent the weekend, like not even at school.
Right.
He had gone home and he had thought to himself that I needed these pine cones. And he gave them to me. And it seems so small, but it's so big.
When they think of you outside of school, that is huge.
Yeah. And he's now like, we have such a great relationship. I believe I'm one of his people. I believe he trusts me and can come and talk to me about anything. And I think that that's definitely just an example of all the stories I have.
Yeah, and I think sticking with it, right? Sometimes we're just the next link in the chain to a student's success. It doesn't always happen on our watch or under our umbrella. Sometimes it is later, but to be able to see it this year and to see that fruition of that relationship, that is so great. I have enjoyed, I get to talk to you guys all the time. This has been special because we get to just talk about the things we are doing right. And I don't think we get enough time to do that. So it was beautiful to be able to hear our stories and hear how we collaborate and work together. So thank you guys for coming in today. I appreciate all that you shared. I hope that our listeners took some nuggets away from these experts and are ready to make some changes with students. And we can't wait to hear about your journeys. Hi, and welcome to the Finding Joy in Education podcast. This is episode 4, Finding Joy Through Student Supports. We just heard from some incredible educators that are around our county supporting students and supporting teachers. Now we're ready for our Leadership Lens segment. And so joining me in studio today, we have Miss Vicki Kohler. She is the Managing Officer of School Social Work here in Pinellas County. We have Mr. Ron Allen, a lead behavior analyst, also in Pinellas County Schools, and Mr. Mike from Psych Cowley, the Managing Officer of Psychological Services. So thank you guys for joining us today in studio. We are so grateful that you're here to share your expertise and give us some insight on student supports. So I always ask every single guest to start off by telling me your story. So Vicki, I'm going to start with you. What's your story?
Well, I am first generation Cuban American. So my parents came from Cuba in the 60s, and I started kindergarten as a English as a second language student.
Wow.
I, all my life, loved teaching and education. I played with my dolls and taught them. But my mom always told me that I should do something with counseling because many times, particularly during high school and beginning of college, friends or acquaintances would call me just to talk to me, to have somebody to listen. And so when I started USF, I started thinking I was going to go into education. And then I got a job at a domestic violence shelter. And that was it. That's when I knew that I have gotten to the decision of going into social work.
And so tell us about how you landed in the position that you're in right now in Pinellas County.
So after about 10 years of experience in the community with mental health and different areas of social work, I was in New York at the time, and I moved back to the Tampa Bay area and interviewed for Pinellas County Schools with Donna Sicilian. And I was hired. And here I am 23 years later. The last 4.5 or so, I've been managing officer for social work.
I love it. I can't wait to hear all the ways that those lenses that you've used are applicable to what you're doing today in social work. Mr. Allen, what's your story?
My story. Mine does start from a child. I didn't always have a love for education. I was a difficult student, difficult child. I was EBD, self-contained, for about 6 years. Didn't really like school. I didn't have a positive experience in elementary or middle school. And it wasn't until I got to high school to where I started to really understand the importance of school and the importance of what a college degree would do for me. Ended up playing high school football, became an All-American, and went to college and got my degree in environmental health science. I was supposed to be looking at dirty kitchens every day as a health inspector, but I realized if I did, I wouldn't eat anywhere. So actually, I graduated and got a job at a security staffing firm. I did that for about 9 years, and one day they came in and said, oh man, we can't afford this office anymore, so we're going to shut it down. I thought, what else would I like to do? So I didn't go right into education. I opened a barbershop. I became a licensed barber, owned a barbershop for about 10 years. And while I was in the shop cutting, though, I was cutting near the college that I played football at. All those professors would come in there and get their hair cut. And one professor, Wardell Johnson, always talked to me about becoming a teacher. He always talked about my story. He always talked about me, being an inspiration for so many kids that I needed to be in the classroom doing that. So he just lit a fire. I went back to college. I got my master's in special ed, and pretty much the rest is history.
So tell us about what landed you in the position you're in today in Pinellas County Schools.
Well, I taught self-contained. It's funny that the EBD student is teaching EBD.
Full circle.
But I taught self-contained for about 6 years. And once I did that, and then I became a behavior specialist at a large middle school in Lexington, Kentucky. I did that for 9 years. I actually had a few jobs at that school. I was the AD, I was the football coach, I was the basketball coach, I was the behavior specialist. So how I landed in this spot, actually, I was wanting to move to Florida and decided to interview for the behavior pool. And obviously, they liked me well enough to say, no, you don't. We're not going to have you at one school. We're going to have you at all of our schools.
Wow.
So they offered me a position with the district. And for the last 3 years, I've worked my way up from a district behavior specialist to an analyst. And now I'm the lead analyst. So
I love it. I can't wait to tap into that and hear some more about how you support teachers supporting students at the school level.
Sure.
Mike, what's your story?
Hey, so my story really revolves around Pinellas County. I was born and raised here, so I went to school in Pinellas County. Shout out to Belcher Elementary, Oak Grove Middle, and Clearwater High School. So, that was my educational journey, and I always enjoyed school and enjoyed the school environment when I was going through school here in Pinellas. I was interested in psychology from an early age and had opportunities here to take AP Psych, even in high school. So, got into that field as an undergrad in psychology. I have parents who are both educators. So my father actually has an interesting background as a school counselor connected to student services and student supports, but then became an administrator, ended his career as a principal. And my mother was a special education teacher. Self-contained SLD, which these days would be a VE resource teacher. So grew up around educators, was interested in psychology, but even with all that, it took until the senior year of my college experience for somebody to say, the field of school psychology actually exists and is a thing. Which is way too long. And that's one thing I always feel like some of our disciplines need to do more of, is even getting the word out there that these fields exist, because they're so rewarding.
Yes.
So once I learned about school psychology, I became very passionate about that, got into the grad school at Florida State, and then came back to Pinellas for my internship, and then was lucky enough to get a job after that. And I was in schools for about 10 years, and then I've been doing this position as managing officer for the last 10 years.
Wow. I love the reoccurring theme through all three of your stories is it took some prompting from a mentor or a parent or somebody to say, hey, you'd be really good at this. And I think how many times do we have those opportunities in our current jobs to do that for somebody else, to tell them, have you ever thought about this? Have you ever considered that? And then you trickle that down to teachers doing that with their students, right? That is where these joy stories come from, is somebody seeing the potential, seeing capabilities in you that just need a fire lit under you to pursue them. So guys, our episode today is all about student supports. And so I thought we'll just start by saying, what does student supports look like for you in your job, in your context, at the schools and teachers that you support? And how does that bring joy to education? So Vicki, we'll start with you. How do you see student supports bringing joy to education?
Well, in the role of a social worker, there's a misconception out there that social workers only investigate abuse and take children away. And that's not what social workers do. Some might,
right?
But for the most part, we're mental health professionals who provide not only counseling services and clinical services, but we're also problem solvers and lead others to resources. And so I feel like being able to be in the school setting, we can serve children and families and help them find the resources that they need, right? Maslow's before Bloom. We need to meet those needs for our students, whether it's clothing, whether it's food, or their mental health, and making sure that they're psychologically safe as well as physically
Yes.
safe.
And I know from my experiences, our school social workers have been the linchpin between the families and the teachers. And so you guys have that knowledge base. You have those resources to tap into. And so for our listeners that are listening, please reach out to your school social workers. They have a plethora of resources available, and not only for the families, but for teachers as well. And I think that's important to hit on as well, that there are resources available for Pinellas County staff as well through the social worker services. Mr. Allen, how do student supports bring joy to education? And tell me what that looks like through your job.
Because my job is dealing with a lot of reactive strategies versus proactive strategies, a lot of times we're, kind of sent out to put out the fires. But, being the analyst, we try to work with the schools on proactive strategies and making sure that the things that we're doing are aligning to that student's best interest.
Can you give me some examples for our listeners who may not know the difference between reactive and proactive strategies? Give me some context for that.
Well, sure. I mean, if I know a student's antecedents, if I understand, what a functional behavior assessment looks like or a functional behavior analysis looks like, to where, I know when the student is heightened, whether it's, me giving the student an assignment that they really don't want to do, that student is seeking some sort of attention, that student, is wanting something tangible, looking for those clues can give you a sense to how you can actually interact with that student. And that's our expertise when we go out to find those antecedents, to find those clues, to look for, what we can do for that student to really be thriving in the classroom. The goal is for every one of our students to feel included. And regardless of how different, we all are, we all want to feel included. Right. We all want to feel as we're a part of it. So, right. We just try to facilitate, that thought process into our teachers and into our schools that we got to teach all these students, yes. They deserve all of our love. They deserve.
That's it. They deserve it. Yeah. At the end of the day, our students deserve this. So it sounds like the way that you're supporting teachers is you're helping them anticipate rather than react once a behavior is exhibited.
Sure.
And so when you go out to schools and you work with teachers in classrooms, how much time do you spend with that one teacher, that one student? What might that look like?
Well, it just depends on, how severe that student is. I usually will, if I go out and I write a plan to help this teacher with said student, I'm gonna check in, every other week to make sure that that student or that teacher is doing, what the plan actually is called for to fidelity. Because, it's one thing to write a plan and to say, hey, this is what we're gonna do, and then actually not do that. It pretty much is a yearly thing for me. If I'm invested, when I'm invested when I meet the kid or when I observe the kid. So for me, I'm going to check on the kid, even if it's a situation, the kid's doing a lot better. I want to know those things. So, but every 2 to 3 weeks, I will check in on the situation to see if it is turned, for the better, or for the worse. And what can we do to augment what we did,
yes.
To get the student doing what we need.
Yeah, and I think that follow up and that follow through is what's very attractive to teachers, right? We often get people telling us how to fix things in our classroom and then we don't see them again. So I think your presence, your reoccurring presence and that anticipating that you're going to be there for those supports. And like you said, if it's not going well, to continue the problem-solving process and not say, well, we tried that. Good luck. We'll see you next year. Right? So I think that's so beautiful. Mike, what about you? Finding joy through student supports, what does that look like for your context? And how does that bring joy to education?
Yeah, so just sitting here and listening to the other two also, there's just so much collaboration that even our folks do with each other, I think, to help lead to that joy for school psychologists. I was listening to Mr. Allen and just thinking about students' behavior and the things that we see sometimes. There's a lot of joy for me in knowing a student and having a student feel seen and having a student feel heard. And it's important to remember that behavior is a form of communication, right? And so at times it can be difficult, especially when we're in the midst of a challenging situation. But to go back to that recognition as kind of a multidisciplinary team focused on supporting the student and then also supporting the teacher in our roles, it is so often we have to remember we're getting to the student through the teacher and we need to support them as well. So I really find a lot of joy when a team can really effectively collaborate, when I see psychologists and social workers and behavior specialists coming together with parents as partners and administrators to really focus on, let's understand what this student's trying to communicate to us behaviorally, what they might need academically, and, creating plans that align with that.
And I think that joy has such a ripple effect, right? So the joy you mentioned of knowing a student, imagine the joy to be known.
Exactly.
Right? So for them in their shoes, that's joy for them, which brings joy to the classroom, which brings joy to the school community, which brings joy to the home. So I think a lot of the work that you guys do is a ripple effect in our school communities. So Mike, you were talking about collaboration. And before we wrap up, I want to just know a little bit more about what that might look like. Vicki, I know we talked about before we started recording that collaboration at your level can sometimes be challenging because oftentimes you might be the only one in that position. So who do you collaborate with and what does that look like at your level?
Well, psychological services and social work really work in tandem often. So for me, Mike definitely is a resource. But I don't want to diminish also the importance of our community partners.
Yes.
So often, we need to meet kids where they're at. We need to meet the family where they're at. And those community partners can be so helpful in providing necessary
Can you give me
resources.
some examples of community partnerships that we have here in Pinellas County?
Oh, yes, of course. So Close to Kids
Yes.
is an amazing organization that provides clothing to families twice a year, to individual kids. Their whole store is set up as if you were going to a department store. And the students get to go and pick out their clothes with their parents and really find pride in what they're wearing.
Sure.
Building their confidence and also really helping parents feel good seeing their children feel happy and confident.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Mr. Allen, what does collaboration look like for you? Who do you most often collaborate with to bring supports to students?
Well, and the construct of our team is collaboration. Obviously, the way our team is built in terms of school climate and behavior, we have a social worker, we have an MTSS specialist, and then we have a behavior specialist. So we collaborate, weekly on the students that we're getting student service requests on. So if it's a student that has academic issues that are linked with the behavior issues, then I'll work with the MTSS specialist on creating a plan for that academic side of it. If it's just behavior, then I usually would take that one on my own. But if it's a student that has academic issues, attendance issues, or if I want to know more about the actual student themselves and their home environment, I'm going to get with that social worker who's done that social history on that student. So we work collaboratively like that all the time. And I think the way, our team works, it makes for, it's always good to have more than one voice, so to have that collaborative effort, I just think is more beneficial to our students.
Yes. Mike, do you have anything to add about collaboration and what that looks like?
Right. I would echo a lot of the things we've heard already. I would also just add one of the groups I collaborate with all the time that I get a lot of joy from is the school psychologists themselves. So in the position that I'm in, I'm able to collaborate with them often.
Yes.
And it's a great source of joy for me. There's difficult problems we work on, but we also get to celebrate a lot of successes.
That's great. That's great. So as we wrap up our time together today, we're going to end with our joy story. So this is a story that you can connect to a student, a family, a colleague, an administrator. And so it kind of grounds you in your why you're in education, why you love what you do, and how it reminds you of that when you tell this story. So Vicki, I'm going to let you share your joy story first.
Wow, my joy story. So I think that as a leader, it has been a learning curve, but I have learned that when we surround ourselves with people who can step in where our weaknesses are, that makes us stronger.
That's so good.
And I feel like my joy comes from being able to lead the social work department. I tell them all the time that I want our department that's so large to feel small. And the only way that we can do that is by knowing each other and by being there for one another, developing each other as experts in whatever areas that they feel is a strength. And that way, as a department, as a whole department, we can continue to move forward and provide the best, excellent service that we can
I
for
love
families.
it. We're so lucky to have you in this position. I'm so grateful for the work that you do, both here at the district, but also at our school level. We feel it. We feel the support. So thank you so much for that service that you provide. Mr. Allen, a joy story.
Well, my joy comes truly from paying it forward. I always say, the circumstances that, I was in as a child, I wasn't going to let define me. I say that all the time to kids today, that the circumstances that you're dealing with today aren't going to define you tomorrow. And my situation did look bleak, but I didn't allow that to stop me from pushing forward. So my joy comes from paying this forward. I believe that, this was God's will for me to be in this position.
Yes.
And having an understanding of, being a difficult student, being a difficult child, and being able to work with them and give them a different vision, give them a different perspective. And I always talk about, being on the other side of this gives me a different perspective than most people that are in my position right now.
And I can't imagine what your relatability does for these students, to know that the person coaching them through this has lived it as well. That's got to be so powerful.
And it is, and like I said, that's what brings me true joy. I always say that I haven't worked the last 15 years because I truly enjoy what I'm doing. This is not work for me. It truly is my passion. And I just want to see, a student, live out their potential.
Yes.
So that's what truly brings me joy.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Mike, let's end it with your joy story.
Yeah, same. Watching kids thrive, right? Live out their potential, seeing kids thrive and be able to be who they are brings me a lot of joy. And then translating that to the work I do now, being able to see the adults who work with students thrive and really be able to tap into their strengths and the things that they're interested in, and to find opportunities to lean into those wherever we can, even in the context of, everyone is a school psychologist, but let's find the things you're passionate about and see if we can really highlight that. And that goes for, I think, all of us across student services. Shout out to our school counselors, too. I don't think we've mentioned them yet.
Yes, we are so very, very grateful for the leadership at this table. And I know you represent just a small fraction of the supports that we have for students. So I thank you very much for giving me your time this evening, for sharing your expertise, and most importantly, for bringing joy to education through student supports. You're listening to the Finding Joy in Education podcast, episode 4, Finding Joy Through Student Supports. Joining me in our Teach Hacks segment, we have 2 very special guests today that I've had the distinct pleasure to work with this year. We have Ms. Gabby Buxbaum and Janella Graham. They are both registered behavior techs, and they are here to share their expertise on supporting students. So ladies, I always ask our guests to tell us a little bit about themselves through the question of what's your story. So Gabby, what is your story?
So I graduated from Seminole High School. I went off to college to get my degree in psychology. And when I came home, I wasn't really sure what route I wanted to go into with that. But I started in the field of foster care. I worked in a specialized therapeutic group home for boys and girls in Pinellas County. It was there that I realized that children with exceptionalities and trauma-based backgrounds needed us more than anyone.
Yes.
So that kind of catapulted me into the world of ABA therapy, which stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis. And from there, I absolutely fell in love. A lot of the children I work with are on the autism spectrum and are neurodiverse. So I did in-home therapy and did caregiver trainings. I helped out with clinic therapy, and then I got into school-based therapy, which has led me to all of you guys, and I absolutely love it.
That's so great. I love all the ways that you worked with students and how it's brought you into the school setting.
Yeah.
Because I think about leveraging those moments of expertise and how you can use all of those moments. And even though you've dealt with students neurodiverse, these work for every kid, right? Like this is for everyone. This is not just for some kids. These strategies, these techniques can be effective interactive with all of our students. Janella, what's your story? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a little bit different. I I have a brother that's on the spectrum. He was diagnosed in 2009 with Asperger's. I have started my bachelor's degree in business management.
Wow.
And I kind of went a whole different path, thinking back to the therapists that have helped my brother achieve everything that he's done. And I started as an RPT with a company, brand new. And then I was like, you know what? I want to do something different. I started my master's degree for BCBA, which is Board Certified Behavior Analyst. I really wanted to work in school. I really wanted to feel like I was making a big difference. And that's what led me here. So I am now working in schools and about to finish my master's degree with that.
That's so great. When I was planning out this episode, I knew we were going to be talking about student supports. And when I got to the Teach Hack segment, it was not long before I landed on both of you, because even in the short time that I've worked with you ladies, you've taught us so much about how to support students and what that can look like. And so I'd like to just kind of hear from both of you of what does it look like in your context of supporting students? How does that bring joy to education? So Gabby, if you'll share first about what supports look like from your perspective.
So we are basically school consultants. We go in. It could look different any given day.
Yes.
Some days we are looking one-to-one with a child that needs a lot of help in a classroom. Some days we are in our offices printing out token boards and visual schedules, getting all of those tools ready so that teachers have the resources they need. And then some days we are holding social skills lunch groups for kids, helping do lunch duty, car line duty, whatever it kind of takes, and wherever we're needed is kind of where we help out.
Yes.
But in the classroom is where you'll find us the most.
That's where we need you the most. Janella, what do student supports look like for you maybe on a day-to-day basis? What kind of jobs might I see you doing?
On a day-to-day basis, we go into classrooms, do observations, kind of help out the teacher wherever we're needed. Then we come back, double back, and meet with the teacher and see like what interventions we can bring to the classroom that help out with each student, or it could be classroom-wide. It just depends on what exactly the teacher needs.
I love it. So when we think about providing these supports, if you could nail down one hack, one little trick, what would be your go-to if you only had 5 minutes to sit with a teacher and give them a little bit of something that could change what they're doing with students? What would be your hack, since you guys are on my hack segment? What have you put in your back pocket that you're like, you know what, this is the thing you need to try first?
Mine I immediately think of is finding what they're motivated for. I say it all the time. We don't go to work unless we love it, but we're also getting incentives for it. And so children also need the same thing. And oftentimes if they're in a classroom setting that's a little bit more difficult for them, having some sort of incentive for them is that much more important. And another part of that is actually educating the teacher on why that's important.
Yes.
That there is a method to the madness. And letting them know that it's not their fault that they don't know it ahead of time, but as long as they can keep that in their back pocket, they can bring it to next year's class and the next year's, and it's something they can pass on to other teachers.
I love that you said educating the teacher, because we just talked about in our last segment that one of the misconceptions or myths about the student services team is that we bring the students then to go play.
Right.
And so the teachers don't quite understand. So you make it part of your job
Absolutely
to go back to that teacher and make sure they understand what you're doing, and probably also so it can be replicable for them, right? You want them to be able to pass the baton, so to speak, right? That they're able to do this for that student as well. Janella, what kind of hacks do you have in your back pocket that you have found make a difference when dealing with student behaviors?
The biggest hack that I have is pairing, what we use in ABA, pairing, which means getting to know the student, getting to actually understand why the student is doing what they're doing. Why are they behaving? Why they are behaving? I know a lot of times teachers don't have a lot of time to get to that pairing process, but if you can take just 5 minutes of the day, 10 minutes of the day, each week to get to know each student, it really makes a difference for the students.
And is that something you go in and can support teachers with, is modeling that and showing them how to do that? Because, the pushback, and, I'm channeling my classroom teacher self, is how do I make time for that? I have 22 students in my classroom.
Mm-hmm.
How do I have a one-on-one conversation? So how do you push back for that? What do you say to a teacher who might say that they don't have the time in their schedule to do that? What are some of your outside the box, maybe thinking for that, for them to be able to pair with their students?
I mean, from the last segment, you guys talked about a lot of really great things about a morning circle, a check-in, check-out system, certain things like that will really help. And just asking, questions like, what did you guys do this weekend? How is your family dog? I remember you just got a new puppy, things like that. And it really helps children trust you. I often say that kids don't really care how much you know until they trust you. And then they can learn from you. So being able to foster this relationship between you and them and make it genuine.
Yes. Kids know.
They know.
They do.
100%.
Yeah. Janella, do you have anything to add on to that?
I agree. Same thing. As far as even saying hello, good morning.
Yes.
Some kids, let me get a hug, or do you need a hug, or are you okay today? I don't think a lot of kids get that sometimes at home, or even from other adults when they're around in school. So just being that person, that safe person that they can go to and be like, okay, I'm having a rough day today.
Yeah.
That's just going to make a difference for them.
Yeah. Before we get to your joy stories, I want to ask quickly, have you observed any challenges or barriers to implementing these supports for either teachers or students? What are some barriers maybe that you've encountered, and how did you overcome them?
I think one of the barriers is that we come off as if we're coming to provide these solutions. And a lot of times our teachers have been doing this for a really long time. And so piggybacking off of what we just talked about is that we need to foster a relationship with these teachers and let them know that we are on your team.
Yes.
We are here to help your classroom environment and to help you find confidence and success in your classroom management, or even your tier 3 kiddos that need some more strict interventions. And so being able to be a confidant for them as well. And then also for our learners.
Yeah. Janella, what about you? Do you have any challenges or barriers that come to mind when we think about supporting students?
Yes, the main one would be like if we go into the classroom and there's a situation, actually communicating with having time to communicate, trying to figure out what's going on at the time, and then actually being able to come back and discuss with the teacher like what suggestions we have for what happens next, or what the teacher would need us to do. It's kind of hard sometimes in the midst of them teaching, planning, doing everything they do.
All the things. But, Monica shared on our last segment that when you start to spend time with a student repeatedly, you do start to know their triggers.
Yes.
And you start to become proactive. So I'm sure there are moments where you walk into a room and you already can tell what has happened. Oh, is it math again? Right? You're like, did we get into multiplication of 2 digits by 2 digits? Same, right? Like, I get you. So I'm sure the more time that you spend with students, the more you're apt to go in and go, okay, I know exactly what's happening because I know his triggers. I know what he will work for.
Yes.
And I know what challenges him and can set him off. So let's end our time together with some joy stories. So girls, these are stories that you can relate to a student, a colleague, an administrator, anyone that is connected to education, that when you think back on this story, it grounds you in your why and reminds you of why you do what you do. So Gabby, would you share a joy story with us?
Sure. It actually happened earlier this year. I had been doing therapy for a couple years and was hit with a little challenge in one of our learners. And he was struggling to advocate for himself, to ask for a break. He didn't have the tools to use functional communication with his teacher, and he didn't have a relationship with her. And so I was able to go in and kind of bond the two of them together, give him the means to ask for a break discreetly so that it wasn't anything too embarrassing for him. And he eventually faded himself out of his own intervention and began asking his teacher for breaks. And he knew that there were trusted people on the other end of that that were going to be there for him. And just watching his teacher find confidence in herself that she can use this hack, and they just have a beautiful relationship. And
I love it.
He ended up winning this award for like most improved student, and it was just a blessing to see him achieve. So,
and isn't that ultimately the goal, is to equip these students to be able to advocate for themselves?
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what happened in that example. Janella, give us a joy story.
My joy story actually is about Gabby and also the ladies that were on the last segment as well, including you. My first time being in a school was actually the first time me coming to Eisenhower, and I was very nervous. I was only working in clinics, so for me to come into a school not knowing what to do, you guys opened arms and you guys were able to show me different strategies that I can use. You were there for me to listen to when I was like, I don't know what to do. But I just appreciate you guys, and the knowledge that you guys have given me has really improved my ability to work in school. So I really appreciate that.
It's so great. And we are so blessed to have time with both of you. But I think a resounding theme that we've heard across all of our guests today is the connectivity among student services. That's the key to student supports, is having that team, having a team approach so that somebody can say something they saw that maybe you didn't see, or to carry the load. If you don't have time for that communication piece with the teacher, I can do this while you go do that, right? So supporting each other to be able to bring the supports to the students is what brings joy to education. Well, we appreciate so much all of our guests today on the Finding Joy in Education podcast, and especially through our student supports that we heard from today. As you leave, you're going to hear from some of my colleagues from around the world. I posed the question, how do student supports bring joy to education? And here's what they had to say.
Hi, my name is Cindy White. I am the 2021 Palm Beach County Teacher of the Year. And student supports bring joy in so many ways in my classroom and also in our district and at my school. For us, what it looks like is it's engaging the students in multiple ways and also thinking of ways to empower their parents. In our classrooms, we ensure that our staff is equipped in ways to teach learners who learn in various ways, whether that child needs hands-on activities or needs an engaging way to help them become stronger in an area that they may perceive that they're weak in. Student support for us is critical because it also empowers our students and our parents to become better learners and thinkers, and to also simply believe in themselves. We want to create an environment here that says, we want you here, you belong here, and we will do all that we can to ensure that this environment that we create here is suited for you. What that looks like at times is our programming. We offer so many programs for our students based on their specific interests and needs. And that brings so much joy to them. It tells them that we see you, we hear you. For our students and our parents, it is critical that for us, when we think of joy in the classroom, we're thinking of ways that we can support them on a multitude of levels.
Hi, my name is Joe Malfair, and I'm Osceola County's 2020 Teacher of the Year. And I wanted to speak just quickly on the magic that schools can have when you implement student support at the highest level. It's no secret. It takes everybody on campus, from teachers to VE teachers to counselors to paraprofessionals, all the way up to administrators, and even at the district level, for us to bring that experience that every kid deserves of an awesome educational experience. And one of the ways we can do that is to tune into student needs. If we can tune into student needs, what ends up happening is something super awesome. They feel supported, and what ends up happening with that is, since they are the lifeblood of our schools, when you tune into student needs, school culture goes through the roof, and it's a place that everybody loves to belong to. So when we're thinking about student achievement, first think about student support.
Hi everyone, my name is Joy Prescott, and I'm the 2019 Florida Teacher of the Year and a 4th grade math teacher at Pinellas County Charter School. I find joy in education by ensuring that my students are getting the correct student supports. For example, when I have students who come to me with an IEP or a 504, I ensure that I'm following that plan with fidelity. It's no secret that we have classrooms that are filled with students who have different learning needs. But when I can provide them with the support that they need just by following that plan, then I'm giving them an even greater opportunity to be successful. And what greater joy is there than to see students succeed?
Hi, my name is Loren Guerrero, and I'm the 2022 New Mexico Teacher of the Year. What brings joy to me as I work in education is seeing students make connections with the resources that are given to them. When the students have what they need to learn, they're able to make connections and apply it. And when I see the students light up that they've learned the information and learned the content, that's what brings me the most joy.
Hi everyone, this is Megan Crombie, 2020 Florida State University School Teacher of the Year and finalist for 2020 Florida Teacher of the Year. Sarah, I love the topic of this podcast, finding joy through student support, And one group of support friends that I would like to talk about is our guidance staff. I absolutely speak for all teachers when I say that we could not do our jobs without the support given by the guidance staff. So a lot of times when we think about support, we think about academic support, right? But students can't reach those academic goals a lot of times until they feel safe, loved, valued, and so much of that can come from a phenomenal guidance support staff. They are always our first line when there's a crisis, big or small, and they are really the glue that holds schools together. They're the ones that help the kids feel welcome so that teachers can get in there and do their jobs of teaching the content. So one thing I want to leave you with when we think about student support is Maslow before Bloom. So that means when we're thinking about what students need, we've got to take care of everything on Maslow's hierarchy of needs before we can take care of those things with Bloom's taxonomy. So if it wasn't for our friends in the guidance department, I think that would be a lot harder. Thank you, guidance counselors. We appreciate everything you do for helping us find joy with student support.
My name is Stuart Parker. I'm the 2022 Orange County District Teacher of the Year. There's sometimes that there's things that our students are going through that teachers just don't have the expertise or the knowledge to help them. And so this year I've had a student who had severe anxiety, and some days she didn't want to come to school, and if she came to school, she didn't want to go to class. And our student services office at Winter Park High School worked really hard with her. And they worked on building up her confidence and her self-esteem and made her really see her value and her worth. So much so that I'm a project-based learning classroom, and our last project, we took a trip to our city hall, and the students presented urban design solutions in the commission chambers. And this student, who months ago would have not even shown up that day, came to school, stood at the lectern, shared part of her group's presentation, and then asked questions of other groups. And that was after a year of our student services pouring into her and helping uplift her and seeing the joy on her face. And then when I told her mom what she did, the joy that her mom experienced and expressed, as well as our counselors on campus, was amazing. The students supported her. The students enjoyed seeing her up there. And it was a really great experience and a moment of joy in those commission chambers for that student. And without our services in the counseling office at our school and our student services committee and team, I'm not sure that that student would have even shown up for that field trip or would be in class as many days as she is now.
Hi everyone, my name is Laura Meehan and I'm the 2022 Hillsborough County Teacher of the Year. Student services bring so much joy to education because they really are the glue that holds everything together. Teachers are so busy teaching standards, curriculum, lessons, hands-on experience, and so much more. However, today in 2024, our students need so much more extra support, whether it be something personal at home with their family, they're not getting along with a friend, they're unsure of what they want to do next with their college, career, workforce, etc. Student services really brings all that together. They consider what the student is going through academically, what they're going through personally, they look at their goals, and they help them get there. Student services teams from ESE specialists, school counselor, ELL resources, career and college readiness coaches. The list just goes on and on of the additional supports that schools have in order to help make students be successful and well-rounded. This would not be possible without that student services team. And I really do bring the joy through by helping the students get to where they want and need to be. Student services are an incredible asset and much needed and very much appreciated in our schools, and our students would not be able to be where they are without them. Our teachers would have even more on their plate without them, and they really just are invaluable in causing joy and making everything happen for our students every day.
Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Lee Perez. I'm the 2022 Nebraska Teacher of the Year. How do student supports bring joy to education? I mean, they are everything from graphic organizers to sentence frames and stems to pictures and visuals. The biggest joy to me as an ESL teacher with multilingual learners is being able to see the progression of these students without the use of these supports. So for example, with sentence frames, my ESL 1-2 students who are typically beginning and intermediate level ELLs are starting to be able to use writing prompts without the use of sentence frames and sentence stems. And honestly, that brings huge amounts of joy to me because that just shows that their linguistic and language development is going up to the next level. And I absolutely love seeing the use of those supports, but more importantly, taking away those supports when their language development gets better brings me so much joy. Thank you very much. Have a great day, y'all.